Josephine's garden one.
Cool.
And yeah, I think choose the way around that my character Saskia's faces and the freedom of birds and stuff like that.
As someone who writes fiction with so much historical context, do you visualize characters? Like, is it an exercise for you? Do they change as the story goes? Like, do you have those things of imagining them?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good question because some of them are real people. So some of them I've got their photos, but they can kind of still seem like someone else I know as well, you know, and you kind of pad them all out from a picture, but also into the full person based on someone you know or someone on TV, an actor, or, you know, how you visualize that person themselves. Yeah, no, it's really interesting process.
Does it make it change the direction sometimes? Because you imagine you have a vision of that character, of what the things that they're doing in life, or a new chapter that you read from someone's history? Does it?
Yeah, or if you find some other detail out about them later and it maybe changes something about what you thought about them, or I guess the picture you build in your mind is sort of built on all of these things that they do, and you know, it's kind of, you write them into existence is the way it kind of works. So you have them doing things and then they flesh out as a real person, and responding to things happen to them, and
So is each one of the main characters in each of your books like real people that then you've kind of padded out their story?
Yeah, so the very first one is based on a real woman, Marie-Louise Girardin, but there's no pictures of her. No one knows what she looked like. She left no written record of what she thought, anything. So they're free reign to figure out what she might look like, other than the description that she was fairly plain and smallish because she pretended to be a man and got away with it. So there was a bit of a physical description, I guess, but... Yeah, and then with some of the others, Josephine is Empress Josephine, so there's heaps of images of her. So that's a different challenge. Then it's making those two-dimensional pictures become a real person. And then in my most recent book, The Freedom of Birds, they were all mostly invented characters placed in the larger spectrum of real world events. Yeah. So I had way more freedom with them, freedom of birds, but freedom to invent who they could be and what they might look like, and that just came out of imagination.
Yeah, so cool.
How much do you read? Do you read a lot?
Yeah, you have to read a lot because it's not just reading the accounts of real people, like Into the World, and that I had the journals of the people. This woman had gone on an expedition around the world, disguised as a man, and there were all of the written accounts of the other people that were on the boat with her. So you have all of those things that you are reading, and there's also, you know, other historians have written a lot about Napoleon and Josephine for that book. So there was reading a number of accounts to come up with your own idea of what the truth is for them or who they are. So there's a lot of reading to understand their world. And then there's just lots of little things like the small things that you might need to describe. You know, it can take you half a day to figure out what they should be wearing, or, you know, how, you know, did they even have pen and paper at that time, or how did they light a match, or, you know, there's all of these questions. You know, were there matches? No, there weren't, you know, and stuff like that.
Or like, I can think of, you know, like things like going to the toilet, which we take so for granted. You could describe that in like 3 words, but then in the same context, in a historical context, it's completely different.
Completely different, yeah.
And would, I don't know, depending on what, you know,
clothing they're wearing.
What is that? And whether there's even, I don't know, you know, like some place that might have, I don't know, you might be assuming, but it's like because so many mundane things people don't record, right? It's like,
that's right,
day-to-day stuff, it's assumed knowledge of the time. Yeah.
I was kind of fortunate with the boats because the Endeavour came into Hobart, where I was researching that one.
Cool.
And so I got to see the sort of urinal thing that exists on the edge of the boat that some of them can use and stuff. Otherwise, it's like a plank sticking out of the end of the bowsprit of the boat, I think. And, they just sit on that and whoo, everything goes over the edge. I've got it sorted now.
Are you comfortable with them? Do you want to remove them or are you good? It's
I'm
up to
okay.
You.
Yeah.
Cool.
Got it sorted now.
Thank you. When you go, just something that got my attention when you were talking about reading a lot of their journals. Do you have your own? Do you do your own journaling, like your Stephanie, doing your thing at night or in the morning? Do you have that?
No, not anymore. I guess I did as a kid. And do you guys? Do you keep journals or diaries? Or
I wish I could do more often.
Yeah.
There was a lot of the times, especially in these 11 years in New Zealand for me, even practicing writing in English. And then for me, it's always that thing of like the personal things that you share with the piece of paper, because it's to you, obviously, and it's for you. But once you put it in a paper, that's what, that's what I was thinking when you said, I get these journals from people like, wow, there must be so many details and beautiful things that you have this privilege of reading, because there's just so many pages that you're going to write your book. But when you're looking at someone's lives and you can see what they wrote about and how they were feeling, that's incredible. Yeah. Just as a human experience, because I was thinking about my writing, how much sometimes
honesty
I put
goes into it.
And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful research work.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. It's a wonderful experience when you actually get the written word of the actual person, even if it's not that kind of personal journal, you can read so much between the lines of what they're saying as well, about getting their personality, which I really like to sort of figure out who they are and stuff. With the book that I'm working on at the moment, she has, the main character is a woman that first climbed Aoraki Mount Cook, and so she has written about that experience, and so it's amazing to have her actual words and the way she is and the character of her and the humour and whatever all comes out. And you get that behind the scenes thought in their minds of what their opinions are of other people, and and that's gold. That's gold for a historical fiction writer.
It's the juice.
That's right. It's like you can imagine being the person finding some letters or something in an attic or something. That would be so awesome to have that experience.
And that's why it's so beautiful when you do that with someone, when you keep that correspondence thing alive. How special. We talk with so many different professionals from different areas about how we're doing this now. Like someone mentioned, I think I listened to it on the radio, like someone saying, there's so much goes in those audio messages that we send to people nowadays. Sometimes you take it for granted. Some people do it every day. Some people choose some people that they do. And they were saying that kind of became our letters, because for a lot of people, they don't have the habits of writing and so much power in sending someone a message. It's that human connection, the thing, but it's with technology, it's changing so much.
Yeah.
Well, there's not that physical remnant of it. We just went and scanned my husband's, must be his great grandfather's letters that he wrote back from the war to his wife and mother, and they're so amazing. There's not a whole lot of it's just it's hell here, there's not real descriptions of what he's going through, but it's the stuff that he would talk about would be what meals they got, and so what food did they get that day? That was a treat, or so and so did this on their day off, or whatever, but that the mundane things really give you an insight into what their world.
That would be
in the small
awesome
things.
For a historical fiction writer as well, because it's those colourful details that you can put in, that make you feel like you're right there with them eating that bowl of stew or whatever. Because it's more than just telling you what happened, blah blah. You've got to put the reader right there, and you've got to show them as it's happening and make you feel like you're there with them. So, yeah, love those details.
So do you end up keeping a whole lot of do you have like really extensive then research notes when you're
I
writing?
should do, but I don't. I think I'll remember that, and then of course I don't. And what I tend to remember more is where I've read it or put it or something like that, and then I have to go back and look at that whole resource again and, flick through and find it. But yeah, that is exactly what I should do. But often you don't know what you're going to need to know. And it's like I always think you're filling your brain with, or your subconscious with all of this info, and then you put yourself down to the imaginative part, and that will work. That will bring out the bits that you need to fill out a scene or so it's kind of like you're filling that well of stuff, and hopefully your brain will pick out those things. They might not be precisely accurate and you'll have to go back and check, but at least that's how I tend to do it anyway. Yeah. But I should be better.
Do you sometimes have do you end up being like, oh, here's a scene, and then, there might be a little hole here, so you can then flick through stuff to see if it prompts it? Like, do you get that, or do you just kind of I don't know, does it just kind of present itself to you?
Yeah, often the day's writing does, or a scene presents itself to me, or usually it's the characters start talking and they start behaving and doing things. But if I don't remember a precise detail that I need to check, I will keep going and just say XX, fill that, find that there, whatever colour it was supposed to be, or the detail of it, but just keep going with get those conversations down and what the characters are doing before you lose that kind of flow.
And how does it work for you when you, because I've never tried to write anything other than extensive, other than research stuff, or like a technical document or something like that. But do you how do you map out a story? How does it work for you? Do you have that kind of, I don't know, do you plan it out I start here and I want to end up here, and then you just let it flow, or do you kind of map out each bit and then fill in the gaps? So how do you?
I'm a bit more of a pantser. Often people say pantsers or plotters. So I'm not the type that plots it out precisely, because I love that magic of not exactly knowing what's going to happen next. What are the characters going to do? But often with a real history, you've got points in time that you've got to hit those. You can't miss those. So I do roughly know where it's going to end, maybe. And what might be the main important crisis points for the character along the way. So I will have an idea of those and where I'm getting to with those, hopefully. Sometimes, you'll write a huge amount and huge amounts will be chopped out of it because it's not necessary either. So it is a lot of just getting started and just seeing where those characters go, and
Do you like,
so cool.
Do you like, or when you look back in history, the times that you choose to go back to, do you connect with any indigenous time as well, or you have ideas for that? Because then you're talking about a completely different human connection, right? Because from what I read and from what I understood, all your main characters are powerful women, doing something meaningful, but women will have a different representation depending on the historical context of that. And when we start diving into the indigenous cultures, you see some of them praising the woman and making her the most, the strongest thing in the community.
The matriarch.
Do you like do you like those elements? Do you write about them? Is it something that you've tapped?
I haven't yet, mainly because I just fell into this world of the French Revolution and French history, and that's where my first three books were about. Those stories of those women from that era. And the one I'm working on now is about an Australian woman that climbed Mount Cook in 1900s, and that sort of fight for the suffragettes and things that she gets involved in, and so a different era again, more like early 1900s, but not right back to haven't tried anything like that yet. But there's so many fascinating stories of women in the past, you know, that either did have those really strong, powerful roles as the leaders, or even were amazing artists or whatever in their time. And then it's interesting how they've been forgotten as well, or covered over, or you know, some of the artists that came up that I found when I was doing my Freedom of Birds book were Italian women like Artemisia Gentileschi, probably saying that completely wrongly, but you know, the amazing artist and terrible life story and all these things. But you know, and you go through these galleries in Europe today and you hardly ever see female painters, but they were around. There just weren't as many opportunities for them, and they haven't often been feted by the male historians of the day or whatever in the galleries, and we don't see them as much. So there's lots of stories of the past.
Doing a service in a way, you know, like, because bringing those stories to our attention at a time that ridiculously we still fight for women's rights. Isn't it ridiculous how you would think, like, 2024 with all the communication we got, it's still a thing. So like, by going there and bringing those stories, like, it's a service. It's a beautiful thing.
And the thing that worries me often is you discover that there's these periods in time where women had a lot more freedoms, and then they lost them again, or they were taken from them, I should say. You know, they were able to study, they were educated, and then it was crammed back in, and they're no longer allowed to get degrees or go to, you know, universities. Invented around 1200 or something, and but you know, by the 1600s, and then I think it's took till about the 1900s in England before women could get degrees again. So you know, there's these terrible periods of time, and then also in our own time we see it in other countries like Afghanistan and that, where women's education has been taken away from them again. And
so many people pictures nowadays pop on social media that you see how it was like 30-40 years ago.
In the 70s.
The 70s. Crazy.
Yeah.
Do you feel like when there's an I don't know if the word is excuse, but when someone says, but it's cultural, and because I feel like sometimes culture is the hardest one to break, because people are very touchy about putting an opinion in someone else's land, let's say in a different country. There's always this respectful thing, you know, of like, oh, it's their culture. So how do you deal with that conflict when being able to tell your version, tell the way that you see?
And often it has to be a person from that culture who comes out and challenges those things, because we've all had that in our own cultures. We've had these times where we've had freedoms and they've been taken away, and or we've never had them and we've had to fight against them. But then there's this overlay, isn't there, of when colonisation came for so many cultures, that their culture got interrupted as it would naturally have progressed or whatever. So now a big thing, I guess, is coming back and finding what that culture was before people can maybe challenge, well, who made those rules? Which is what we're all doing, you know, about our own things that have happened for European women or whatever. Who made those rules that they had to give up their child, or couldn't be educated, or you know, and who benefits from that? Who gets the power out of that? So I guess it's often it has to be the person from their own culture that maybe makes those challenges or raises those challenges.
Yes. Were there moments or women that you found that you had some sort of like a connection? You know, I guess you connected to all of them, but like a story that really got you, that you took more time to digest and to understand. And
because they're all they're all different women, and they're all different from me too. I really actually more interested in other people's stories than people like me, you know. And so it's a real challenge, but a real fun challenge to try and figure out who they are and why they do things. And some of them are not, you know, sometimes Josephine has made some decisions that you wouldn't actually, don't actually, you know, go along with. And same with, you know, I think some of the others are probably like that too. But it's kind of like you've got to empathise with them and see why they made those choices and what you can bring to show other people what they, you know, that they're still, you know, really interesting people. So I guess in terms of the people that I feel the strongest to, there was a sort of more minor character in Josephine's garden, and she, I just felt so sorry for her that she'd had this relationship with, you know, her husband who died. She'd never given him a child, and then she lost everything. So she got kicked out of the family home. She had to go and live back with her parents, and, you know, she's sort of 40 by now or something. And that was it. You've got to start all over again because you don't own anything. You are owned. Yeah. And that's really awful. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a terrible thing. I think that feeling that you're owned, and that's, I think, probably what I'm getting at with a lot of the stories are about independence and women trying to find their independence, and men too, and their struggles with dominance, say, and so forth, and the impact of colonisation, the impact of war. But that finding independence seems to be a really strong theme for me.
It must be such a hard balance to get the you know, like the personal context of someone's personality that you're building, and then also trying to tell the reader the context of their life, so like the time that they've grown up with, like the kind of things that we would never, you know, the fact that when you get married, you belong to your husband, you get handed from your father to your husband, like things that we can kind of vaguely wrap our heads around, but have no true understanding of what that means and the risks that would be, what the importance of having children, all of that stuff. It's like trying to tell the reader all of that societal context,
make
and
us
cultural
understand,
stuff, and how that deeply seated thing like then impacts their decisions that they can't even necessarily verbalize because they don't have any idea that it's it must be such a complex thing to try and
one that
tell.
was really hard, I think, is understanding that time. So the first woman had an illegitimate child, and she was abandoned by her lover and cast out by her father. So what others have said about her is she was escaping the wrath of her father. And that's a really hard thing to get your head around, that it was such a major thing. You know, they were a well-off family. It wasn't like, you know, she was, it wasn't the fact that they wouldn't be able to raise the child because they had no money. It was that she had embarrassed them so much, and, you know, that reputations could be lost and positions could be lost if you caused a scandal like that in your family. And that's really hard today to feel that the same way, I think. That kind of impact of that, because you think, well, surely, you know, it's not the end of the world. A child is born, yes, but you can afford to raise it, so why don't you as a family, you know, like. But
I guess that.
But it was a totally different world,
And that all comes back to the girl children being seen as property. You're only valuable if I can marry you off, and there's an advantage. To the family. And
you have disobeyed me. You have done this thing that is not in my control. Fascinating.
How much have you gone back to grasp this massive idea, but at the same time pretty narrow, thinking of the property and passing on the rights? It's rooted in the relationship. It was the moment that love became the deal, you know?
Yeah, it's a hard thing because it was such a business transaction, the whole marriage thing for, richer families, I guess, and the ones that had lineages that they wanted to link up and stuff and some of it was necessity as well. Like Josephine was married off at 16, sent away from her home in Martinique to Paris to marry a man she didn't know, and that wasn't Napoleon, that was her first husband. And he ends up putting her in a convent to get rid of her. Just, you've got absolutely no power. You're just sold on to the, and that was to save her family from ruin, financial ruin, that first marriage. So, there wasn't much for those richer families probably in the way of love matches. And I have assumed some love matches and some lovely family connections and loves coming up in some of my other characters that are totally invented because I've got the freedom to do that. So I'm sure it happens that people did fall in love and marry, obviously. But if you were of a certain social strata, you probably didn't have that freedom at all.
It would be, luck by circumstance.
If it happened to be someone that you barely could stand. Yes.
That's right. And France, do you have a connection with France, like you personally?
Not a really strong one. I always, I'd learnt a little bit of French at school and I've always been drawn to it and went to, say, Paris before I went to London. So I guess I've been sort of drawn to France as a place, but no, I don't have a personal connection. My mum is from Holland, so totally unrelated to France. Although there might be some Huguenot sort of background there, so who knows when you check all that stuff.
Is that something from Holland's history that you appreciate, like some historical moments or things that during the research, I guess, you also connect with a lot of people on similar journeys, powerful women writing and connecting, and then you go deep into your own roots? Did you get to
I haven't done that yet, but I have been in recent years to Holland to just keep an open mind to what stories might come about, and in Amsterdam and stuff. And I've written some things around that with travel characters visiting these places. So I don't know what will come of that yet. I'm just sort of playing with that, but
let it brew.
It's good to keep it open, isn't it? It's a beautiful thing that you do, because you never know what's going to be the thing that is going to hit you and make something beautiful out of it. So the stories that we get all the time, that we hear.
That's right. And it's finding that spark of an idea with, say a real person, but what it can mean to a reader today as well, like what's relevant, why should they care about this story about this person, what is it telling us that we bring forward to now and think, this is universal, this is something that's still in a way we're fighting with, or
You have a background in you're a PhD, biological science. When was the last time that you were invested in? Is it something that you still do as a job, or did you leave that behind to pursue?
Pretty much left that behind when we moved overseas, although these days I now help with a conservation group, and so I've had to learn a whole lot of new stuff about all the impacts of stoats and predators on our native birds, because I was a freshwater scientist, so completely different to that, but it's been great to look at the science side of that, and what that can bring to the conservation of our native birds. And so I've still got some of those connections going, but I don't get paid as a scientist anymore. I don't do any of the work that I used to do. I pretty much went and tried some other aspects of my life, really, you know, other interests like art and followed the writing, yeah.
And that was back in Tasmania, was a big chunk of your work?
Yes.
With that, or even before?
That was in New Zealand, so with NIWA in Hamilton, so yeah. So that was mostly, coming out of my studies at university and then being... at NIWA for about 15 years, and then I decided to, when we moved to Tasmania, Australia, to try some of these different sides of my life. So
nice. I told you before the show, I went to Tasmania, loved it, and I'm always interested in Kiwis' ideas of living in Australia, coming back, you know, like those experiences, and you chose pretty cool place to live. Yeah. How is that feeling of coming back, seeing how the country works?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, it's great to see your own country from afar as well, isn't it? You know, you sort of learn more about it and
fall in love with it again.
Yeah. And it's just fascinating being in a new place, isn't it? And exploring and seeing the one wondrous thing, you know, we're so close to Australia, but the plants and animals are completely different. So you get a totally different experience, and, you know, the indigenous peoples are so different, and, you know, you get it's a fascinating change from such a short space of time, really, or distance. Yeah.
What do you miss the most?
In when I was living in Hobart, and I was right in the centre of the art gallery area, basically. So I loved that buzz of the city and all the galleries and, you know, tourists coming and, you know, new exhibitions and wandering around, just having that visual stimulation. Something was always changing. People were coming and going, and it was a beautiful old historic centre as well, which I love, being a historical fiction writer, obviously. So I totally have none of that now. I've gone to the complete bush, and so I guess that's what I miss the most, is a bit of that buzz of the, you know, the human creation of things. And, you have different benefits of being, you know, remote and in the bush and stuff, but I do like that chance to go back and, you know, experience it again. And
yes,
yeah,
I miss the city as well.
Do you? Yeah.
Every once in a while, I miss Sydney.
Yeah.
It's nice to go when you can and watch.
And you
kind of
need to go back every year, I reckon. It's like you get like that itch around 8 or 9 months, and then you're like, oh, and then the year comes up, and you're like, no, I got to go again. Go back for a couple of weeks. And you're like, no, I'm over it.
Yeah, that's too busy. Too busy. Yeah. I went back to Hobart last year for a month as a writer's residency thing, and loved it. But because I hadn't been back for many years because of COVID, you know, we hadn't really travelled anywhere. That was when I realised, I do actually miss this, you know, because you kind of do your own thing and you don't really know. And then I had the same thought as you. I was like, what if I just come every year, you know, and just have a city break, or
fill that cup that needs to be filled every once in a while, and then go home.
Off grid. Isolated. Couldn't isolate more.
That's right. Hide away.
Cool though. So Coromandel was always in your radar. Was it something that you always liked?
Yeah, we bought the property that we have now many years ago, and we used to come up and camp on it and build a little shack and, you know, all that sort of be a weekend escape sort of place. So then when we actually built a house that you could live in, we thought, well, why not at some stage come back and actually live there? So that's what we did. Yeah, we've been there about 6 years now. So
cool. How long did it take to adapt, to say like, cool, I got this, off grid, you know, you choose what is the time to do something, and sometimes you wait. How is that?
Well, it's not too bad. We've got we were not sure how it was going to work, really. You know, sort of, you do have to keep an eye on the weather so much more than you would ever have to think about. But it turned out that we'd, you know, sort of sized the house pretty well for what we needed for 2 people. It's not a big demand. And, you know, sort of, you have to be careful in winter if there's not enough hot water for the shower and stuff. But actually, thinking back to what you said about a journal, I actually did start writing a journal then when we moved back, because I was sort of thinking, well, what's this? I should read it again. See what I actually wrote.
That is cool. That is cool.
Because it was an adjustment to, both of us not really having, you know, regular money coming in anymore either. So there was that kind of adjustment. And then there was the, you know, living off grid and being aware of, you know, where all your power and wastes, and, you know, if anything happens, it's on us to fix. You know, there's no calling up anyone. So there's all that to, and then to build networks in new areas like anyone does when they come somewhere new. You know, you've got all of that change happening at the same time.
It has an interesting, at least for me in my perception, like there's kind of like a glamour to it when someone says, oh, I write, I'm an author, you know, because for artists, we know how hard it is to make a living out of it. You know, like, so when someone is doing something and really going for it, you know, you got to bring it back to, it's more about what do you want to pursue. So you change your lifestyle instead of wanting all these things. You see, as a writer, I would love to have this and I want to sustain my lifestyle through this. So when you said, oh, you know, we didn't have the job, we didn't have that income coming, what came to my mind was like, how were you planning with the writing and understanding kind of like, cool, a business as well. And I need these connections, because I was wondering about the content that you write. How does it make it easier? Does it make it harder for publishing companies to support you to go for it? You know, like the whole
to be far away from
picture.
everything. You do feel like you've maybe not right there where you know, you're not attending lots of book launches where everyone else is, and you're not right there with the festivals. Maybe you're not able to participate in that same way. So I mean, while it's good that you've got all this time to dedicate to the writing, you're not building those networks and having that connection with people. Although in saying that, we do have social media and all that nowadays, so we keep so much more connected in that sense, and you can kind of be connected across countries in that way, and wider things, and sometimes you make wonderful friends out of, you know, people that you're just seeing what they're doing, and, you know, and then you get to meet them in real life somewhere when you know, and it's really fun. So there is that side of it too. But swings and roundabouts. I'm not sure whether it's good to be so remote or better to be connected. Hard to know. Bit of both.
I'm all for that. Let's just do that. I'll have you get a second bedroom. I'll come with you.
That's right.
Do you have a routine for your writing, like a space or a way that you write, a bit more of like a personal thing when it comes to writing?
Not really, because I have everything on my laptop, so I can be anywhere and write anywhere, sort of thing. And we often, you know, sort of move out of our house and rent that out as well to tourists, and, you know. So then, so it's handy to have everything in a bag, and, you know, whatever books. And I'm big on having little notebooks that are for each project as well, because I like to, that'll be great, I'll quickly note down that idea before I lose it. I tend to have all of that together in a bit of a bag, and I can take that with me anywhere then, and I can set up at a kitchen table really, or, you know, wherever I want to. I think it probably would be good though if I did have a dedicated setup area where I can put things on the wall and pictures and, you know, but I found that I really like to be able to look out a window or something. So I don't really like to be in a closed-in back room. I like that distance of looking out and thinking about things before you get back down to it. So, yeah. But routine-wise, try and write in the morning because it seems to be a bit brighter then. Or you've had the night to, you know, think up what's going to happen in the next phase. And, and I tend to, if I'm in the writing the first draft stage, say, I tend to be working on that for a few months and then maybe have a break of a couple of weeks or something like that. And then before going back to the editing,
Yeah. So,
please,
do you mind?
please. Oh, no,
so
at all, please.
How does it work with, like, you've got a publisher, and do you then have an idea with your next book and you're like, right, this is my next book, please publish it? Or, like, how does it work? Or do they say, we've got an opening in this kind of month? Like, how does that interaction work, and how do you decide?
So I've got an agent in between.
Oh, right,
that.
okay.
So I send things to her first, really, and then and she will pass it on to. So when with my first novel, she passed that manuscript on to about 6 publishers at the same time, you know, and then it was Allen and Unwin that picked me up from there. So yeah, I usually send my manuscripts to her, and she'll give feedback and say whether she thinks it's ready to go to someone yet, and maybe we'll work on it a bit together, and she'll send it out from there, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And is there, once you get to that point, like say you've worked with your agent, you send it out to do you stick with the same publisher like for all of your books, or does it go to the same process every time?
Yeah, well, it's really up to them. So, you know, you just can't there's no guarantees in anything. Yeah. So unless they've offered you a 2-book deal or something, some people have that, then you've got that, and, you know, or a first right of refusal for reading the next thing that you do.
Yeah.
But I don't. So I've got as long as I like to write something, but they may not like it, may not accept it. So yeah. So it's very uncertain. Very uncertain, and you spend years working on stuff, and it may not get picked up, it may not go somewhere, and then you just got to keep going.
How does I'm going to ask some really kind of boring but interesting questions.
Never boring.
How did the economics of that work? Like, do they come to you and they're like, right, well, here's how much we're going to pay you for this book, and that's it? Or is it per copy sold? Or like, how does it
actually work? You basically sell your agent or whatever, or you sell that book to the publisher. So and it's usually termed in terms of an advance.
Yeah.
So there'll be a amount of money that they will offer you for that manuscript, and they'll pay you part of it, you know, up front once they've accepted it, and then part of it when that goes to publication.
Yeah.
Usually most books don't get much more in the way of royalties after that advance. You know, it's a good thing to earn out your advance is how they term it, which means that you've covered enough in sales to have paid back that advance. Because the horrible reality that people probably should know is that you only get about 10% of the sale price of a book. And you've got to have sold that many 10% to cover your advance. Yeah. And not every, I think it's maybe 75% maybe do earn out their advance. I can't remember the details on that, but it doesn't always happen.
It's not always,
Yeah. And you don't ever have to pay it back, but, you know.
No, but it would look good. I guess it's all of those things like you want to, because then the next book you present them to, they're like, right, cool, we haven't lost money on this one. You know, that's the...
Yep.
what you want.
Is that a thing with so when there's the promotions, there's like when you say a bestseller, a book that is selling forever, like if you think of classics that are always selling, are the authors constantly getting something out of it, or sometimes it depends on the deal? It might be that an author doesn't actually get any more from his
I think most people would have royalties written into their contracts. So some of those classics, I guess, they're going to their estates of the people now. So they probably would have it written in their contracts that there will be the royalties going on if it does go beyond what you were paid out. So there is that possibility that you will, and usually that's that 10%. So it's or whatever someone has managed to negotiate.
Is that a thing with working with women that is appealing for you as well, that you pursue, or you open for ideas and for kind people, cool people that come your way?
Yeah, you mean like in subject matter, or as colleagues?
In business as well. Like, do you also pay attention to the women in the industry that you're dealing with? Like, is it something that you're paying attention as well?
Not that I've really noticed. Like, I came from the science world that I was in. I was working with mainly men, so I was used to that really. And so it was unusual actually when I went and worked actually in the arts field first. And that was mainly women, so that was a big change. And and there are also in publishing a lot of women and editors and agents and publishers. It's not something that I've consciously thought about really. But more so in the subject matter probably.
Right. Chloe, you go. I know that you go. You're thinking. You're like. Have you ever considered writing a book, do something like that?
Looks like she has, I reckon.
Oh, because Chloe does so many cool things. So I would see you. That's why I asked about the journaling and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I can see you having that as a thing for you.
I read a lot. Like, I think I read 150 books last year.
Right,
I just,
wow.
Devout, but they're downloaded on my Kindle, so I can't tell how big they are. So
yeah.
They might be very small books. But I just I just
Inhale
devour them.
Yeah.
And
you're the perfect reader. That's what that's what we love.
I know. That's me. It's just and I'll just be like, next book. It's just I've always wondered about whether I could ever do it, but I just don't know. I just don't know if I have a way with words. Like, I'm such a visual person. I don't know.
Yeah, it is a visual process though, like, because you visualize what's happening and then you're just describing what's visually happening to you, and
Does it ruin your, do you read for your own joy as well?
Yeah. It doesn't ruin it, but it does change it, because you do read to appreciate what,
and you'll be able to see the structure
and what they're doing. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and you think, oh yeah, that's really good.
That's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Got a present, Chloe. I didn't want to open before because even the packaging is so cool. Look at this. Look at all the patterns. Do you paint as well? Are you into other art forms?
Yeah, I did pastel painting mainly, but some acrylics as well. And I just wanted to try lots of stuff in my time. I've done printmaking and
Oh, that's fun.
Wow.
I'm doing a mosaic course this weekend. Actually.
Really?
This is the coolest. You got actually.
Yeah, that
look
was
at this.
beautiful. But
Wow, this is amazing. True.
Oh man, they know how to do it, don't they?
yeah,
It's so beautiful.
so
the
beautiful.
whole
Yeah.
thing is so
Yeah.
thought out. It's so beautiful.
yeah.
Thank you so much.
So that
The
was my
Freedom of
latest
Birds.
one. Yeah.
We got them all here.
Yeah.
Taylor, is it this one here? First one. What year?
1790s. That one. French Revolution.
French Revolution. Josephine's
Early
Garden.
1800s. Yeah.
1800s. And the one that we got, baby.
Yeah. Fall of Napoleon, sort of 1814.
Was he that short?
Yeah. No,
Was he?
he wasn't.
He wasn't. What things about history you had an idea when you were at school or when you grew up, and then as you started doing your own research, you realized it was a bit different, the story that people tell to how things really were?
Well, funnily enough, I did no history at school, so I was did not study anything old. So it's kind of coming to it from the sciencey thing, actually, because the first one was about that sort of exploration and, biological explorations, which sort of matched that. But yeah, there were so many things I didn't know about history. I didn't even really know. I sort of roughly knew some French Revolution stuff, but not to the detail that I had to learn to understand it all and understand what was happening with the boundaries of all those countries at that time. And but also learning, one of the things that sticks in my mind is that women were fighting for the right to be citizens in France, have the vote, right back at that time of the French Revolution, 1790s, well before suffragettes and any of that time that we normally think of as the time for the, fight for the vote. And it's so depressing, really, because it took them so long. Those women that, I came across their stories while I was learning that stuff, they would be probably horrified to realise that it would take until 1945 in France before women got the vote, and they started right back in the 1790s or maybe even before, sort of. And sometimes you come across these written passages from women in Italy in the 1600s when they were quite well educated and they were writing and leaving records of what they thought, and very modern, almost feminist thoughts as well. They totally understood that they were constrained and not being able to live to their full potential and stuff. And you just think that's so sad how long it took for things to change. Yeah.
Have you got something on that? I love it. I love it because I can see your brain going to so many places.
Well, because I was just thinking about how it's such a wonderful way to learn about a time in history. Like it's such. I think a lot of my historical knowledge came from. Like getting absorbed into books and into series, and you kind of you can fixate on a point in time. Yeah. And then you start being like, oh, and then I'll read that book and that book. And that
like the Tudor ones or something,
yes,
like
that's exactly what I was thinking. It's like Henry VIII,
that queen, and then there's that queen.
And you just start going like, whoa, and like the different stories. And how does it work when you have to then reference the material, like coming from a scientific background, and then like what is the obligation? Right. And what is the obligation to kind of consume this information that informs your writing, and then I guess reference it properly where you got it from, and at what point is that decision?
I try and do a bit in an author's note, but you can't overwhelm it either. But I just do like to make sure that all of that for my own self that I've double checking that when I'm putting something in that it is correct, you know. So the challenge for me is getting those points right, but still telling an interesting story around those things, because sometimes people's real life stories aren't that, interesting all the time. So you've got to kind of, choose the bits that are going to be spicy enough, but also, stick to the truth, for people as you can, and be honest to that. And, and there's a responsibility you feel when they're real people. It feels, like you've got to do your best with that.
And then like coming from an academic background, kind of, that like really strong obligation to reference everything very particularly.
Like in science writing, you can't say a line without making sure that you're referenced.
And then how is that? Like that switch. Is it just kind of made up as you go? Like you make that decision yourself, or like on what you feel like needs a note? Yeah, it's just so like that switch of forms of writing must just.
It's really freeing though, to not have to reference every single line of work. But it does give you a great training in that thoroughness, I guess, so that I can feel that I've got enough. I've got the understanding and the I want to present it to you so that you, the reader, can make your own mind up about this period in history. But I'm telling you enough of what occurred that you will come to the same conclusion probably. Yeah.
And I guess it's framed in a way that's like, this, I mean, it's fiction. So it's not.
It's fiction. So nobody's going to be really cruel if, but then they might too. They might say, you got this wrong, this pedantic thing. So I am quite cautious of that, even down to like checking like croissants. You thought that they were so French, but, they actually were brought over from Austria and quite late. So in the first book, they weren't in France yet. So I sort of had to, everything that I would just casually put in, they might be eating, you have to double check that they actually could because, potatoes were there at that point in time now or, all those sorts of things.
Do you say to your husband, like, did you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You're just like, your head will pop out from your desk.
Yeah.
Like, this fact that
that's right. Yeah.
That's
These
what makes it
random
interesting, though, isn't it? Because a good read is the descriptive one, is the one that you can see the scene in your mind. Because we're fascinated about that. It's about history, about going back there and understanding.
Yeah, it's like time travel, eh?
Time travel, yes.
You've stepped out of the TARDIS and you're in there. Yeah.
That's and also going the other way, going to the future as well.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing because then you also thinking, who is going to read in the future, and did I get it? Or was I going the right way? Do you have some? Because I guess you kind of have an insight of what's coming. Because when you understand history, especially recent history, with societies changing and the power moving in a way that you can kind of understand.
Yeah.
Do you have something like for what's coming, and like do you also get some ideas of like, okay, I can see this country going this way?
Yeah, that's really interesting because you're right. I do think that history repeats because there's actually personality types repeat. There's set things that people do that they keep doing, like wanting to be world dominating leaders, so definitely. And there is that, especially with the climate change stuff and, definitely I've sort of been thinking, well, what if we imagined futures that things could work? Maybe that's the role of fiction writers too, is, to use the imagination to how we can get through this, So I think that is kind of interesting. And I sort of played it with a bit in stories and nothing that I've put together into a novel, but it is an area I'd be interested in as well, is that, well, what can we do? What if we go this way? What will happen to us? And, what's likely to happen based on what we've done in the past as humans,
Yes, Stephanie. Do you see some similarities with the revolution industrial and the AI nowadays? Like people losing their jobs?
Yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah. It's like another technology that is going to rapidly change for us creatives as well as, as it has for other industries with motorized technology and stuff like
Industrial
that.
Revolution.
So and it is scary for those of us that make our living from art and creating and the fact that AI has stolen those things to be itself as well. It's informed by all of the stuff that it's gleaned from the internet or wherever it's got it from, often without payment to the artist. So, but yeah, it's one of those scary moments in time that it will be a big change for all of us afterwards.
Do you see positive aspects in the industry, something that like technology is. So you mentioned social media, which is massive, which is definitely a beautiful way to connect. But I don't know, any other area that you see writers and publishing companies benefiting from?
Interesting how much people have gotten into audio books and things and audio versions of so, and you'd imagine that there's quite a lot of scope for putting lots of interesting things into the audio as well, you know, people like putting the sounds and music.
I always think that because when I choose an audiobook, I choose it based on the sample, but if the voice, something that I may read and take it in, but if the voice is not right, I'll be like, no, I couldn't listen to 6 hours of this. Like, because I just won't take it in. So it's like, depends on who's narrating it. Like, imagine if you could be like, right, well, I've got 6 choices of voices that are AI voices, or I could like choose one that is like my inner voice that I read to myself in, you know, like, cause, and it's so many of them are like, they're American, or that's like their pacing of their words might be a bit too slow, a bit too fast, you know, that sort of thing. It's so, you can get really like finicky and be like, right, I end up following narrators. I'll be like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'll be like, oh, this is I like this voice and this pace. So then I'll follow
that's great.
her.
Yeah. Well, that's great to know as a writer, because I have listened had to choose the voices of who's done the audio books of mine before. And it is hard because, you know, you kind of want it to be an in-between accent.
Of course,
When it's historical, you don't really want it to be a really strong
French accent.
Yeah, or a really strong Kiwi accent or something. A bit strange. But so,
Well, it's so funny because you would like, in a film, you would expect an accent. Oh, actually, lots of films you would see, they would have an American accent or a British accent or whatever, even if it's set in France. And when you read to yourself, like, or when you're reading, in your head, you don't have an accent applied to what they're saying. But so interesting. That would be so hard to choose.
Yeah, because sometimes the audio readers, the actors, ask whether they should put on accents. And I'm kind of saying, well, actually everybody would be speaking French. So there's no one there listening to them speaking English and French accent or something. You know, like
you've got your
they're
one
all
Russian,
French.
Then he should.
You're just going to have to imagine that this is all happening in France. So no, we've steered away from the accents, unless I think it'd be fair enough if you were, you know, someone, French person or a British person went to a different German or something like that, you know,
Yeah, the outlier.
The outlier amongst them,
Do you listen to audiobooks yourself or podcasts? Do you have
there's some writing podcasts, that are sort of I got into them because they were like telling you the behind the scenes stuff. So they're really useful for authors and stuff like that. Yeah.
Who is putting some good content at the moment?
So the ones, the writing ones that I have listened to recently, The Secrets from the Green Room and the First Time podcast. So they were just ones that, bring on other authors and you get the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Thanks for sharing.
We need you here.
Thanks for sharing.
Everything.
And when are you starting your book?
I know.
Sounds like you're
I'm gonna listen to a couple of podcasts first.
The time to start is now, because it takes way longer than you think. So that's my top tip. Start now.
Have you had one of those experiences of going quite far with a story and stopping, just like
although I've got a couple of unpublished manuscripts really, so I may go back to them, I may not, you know, it's sort of, you lose the momentum for it after a while, but they are complete stories though, so I didn't get to like say 75% and then decide no, this can't go anywhere. I pushed through to the end on both of them. But that is an interesting part of the art creative thing, isn't it? And I always really admire this about other artists and, you know, just that in their singular focus in their chosen world of what they're doing and what that takes to just keep going with no outside you know, thing that this is going to be any good. And it's even worse for writing because no one sees it. It's not like you're working on a mural that that others can comment on or, you know, jewelry or something. But you're working for years on something that no one sees. They don't really want to hear about all the minute details of things that you've found out. And you just have to keep that focus going. And and I just love that about other artists that have got that confidence in their style or whatever. And I just think, you think, they've really got it. And I just so admire when they just keep going at that thing that they're really good at,
Good. There was something that I read on your website from an interview. You were talking about tales, about how some of the I think you mentioned Little Red.
Little Red Riding Hood. Yeah.
How had this feminine kind of like advice kind of thing, but then with the brothers Grimm, is that in it?
Yeah.
It became more of a child orient. Like, I was fascinated about that. I just wanted to get some of your takes on that.
Yeah. So the original Little Red Riding Hood story was written in the French salons sort of thing around the 1600s, and it was a story that had a moral actually written at the end of it that told young women to be careful of sly and charming men sort of thing, was actually written there.
Good lesson.
Yeah.
The wolf.
But then those Huguenots and those French people escaping France at various times went into Germany, what we know of Germany, and that story over the time changed, and its meaning became more about, don't go off in the woods alone, as children you'll be captured. And it was interesting, the time that I was looking at was the time that the brothers Grimm, were gathering those stories together. And what they were doing at that time was really saying they were invaded by Napoleon in France at that time, and they were gathering their cultural stories basically. And, they had changed in meaning from some of the French ones that had come or whatever, but they were gathering these stories together, and it was kind of like the start of their idea of nationalism, of who they were as a people, with their stories, which I think is also an interesting thing that, it's the idea in many cultures that you bring your stories together, and that's when you start to decide you are your own separate culture, and I wonder how we do that with New Zealand as it is now, and what our stories are too. We're probably still in that gathering phase, I think.
I don't know. I think as my husband and I talk about this all the time about how te reo is the thing that binds us together as New Zealanders, and as first generation Australian kids growing up in Australia. So my parents would use, or my dad would use Māori words sporadically, we'd say kia ora or like pokunui or, like kai, very few. But it was enough that when you met other families that had a Kiwi parent or whatever, auntie or uncle or whatever, those reference words were the things that you were like,
bound you. Yeah, right.
Like you could identify straight away, even if you couldn't pick someone's accent. So and Dave and I always talk about this with our girls, how it's so important for them to learn te reo at school, and
it's
those
beautiful.
things,
Keep it going.
Because for us growing up in Australia, it was the thing that that you would be like, oh, they're a Kiwi family, and my dad identified so strongly as a New Zealander, still does, and push that into all of us.
Right.
That we were
kept
Kiwis.
That. Yeah.
We were born and we grew up in Australia, but we were Kiwis. Yeah. So it's just, and I just remember as a kid, you just you'd meet one family and someone would say, oh, kia ora, and you'd be like, oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that's right. It gives you that warm feeling, doesn't it?
And it's just as, and we were children, we had only ever come back in holidays, and I don't know. I just remember so strongly being like, oh,
that's right.
They are from here as well. Even though I never lived here till I was an adult, and we only, very small holidays here.
Yeah. No, it's so important, isn't it? Yeah. It's so wonderful that there's so much more te reo being used just generally,
But I'm sure in those stories, I know there are much more complicated stories and the collection of those stories, I think, being gathered will form the story of modern New Zealand as well as New Zealand of the past. But yeah, I was just thinking of my childhood feeling of it all.
Yeah. And did you have stories then that had New Zealand plants and animals in them, say? Did you grow up with little stories of kiwis and,
definitely kiwis. My dad would sing us the national anthem as we were going to sleep, and then he would make up songs to the tune of the national anthem.
That's cool. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah.
My dad used to pray, so singing the anthem is interesting. There you go.
He obviously had this really strong migrant experience, that he wanted to bring.
Yeah,
his
and like we all
culture
went
to
for
you.
we all were all black supporters. Like, I mean, that's all of that.
Yeah.
Like, the big wider cultural reference of all those small things that you realise when you're in Australia. But it's such a, I don't know, we reflect on it so much now that we live here and our kids are growing up here and they have New Zealand accents and they're doing everything that we as little kids wanted to do. Be out diving and snorkeling and fishing, all of that stuff. And they speak te reo at school and,
it's so good.
They can sing the national anthem and they have a karaoke at the beginning of class, all of that
it's
stuff.
natural for them too.
And they don't even question it. And we just get so much joy out of watching them that be their normal.
Oh, that's so good.
Anyway, sorry, sidetrack.
And do you then teach them Australian things? Are you got the Diary of a Wombat story and you got that,
and all of those things. And they, I don't know, you leave a country and all of those things become shiny and new again, especially for little kids, because you're should we go and look at a koala at a zoo? Whereas I was like, there's no way I would go and look at the koalas at the zoo. But now I take my little Kiwi kids and we talk a lot about snakes and things.
Yeah.
No, I think when you're not living there, you go back to glossing over and you can pick out the bits that mean a lot to you and all of that. So which is what I'm sure my dad did. Just picked out the bits that meant a lot to him. He hasn't ever
wanted to share it with you. Yeah.
And we started the show talking about that, about culture, about the power of culture, for the good, for the bad, for the things that stick, for the things that should stick, but people get rid of, and then you're like, so it's like with the current moment from the foreigner perspective, for us, it's so strong, it's so beautiful to see kids learning te reo and the younger people really embracing that identity, because we talk to so many different people with different ages on the show. So you start to understand that for a lot of people was traumatic, a lot of people was taken out of them, and for a lot of people was just normal to be what it is, they always spoke the language. And then if you're not tapping into the political world, like we were saying, of course it affects our lives with the cost of living and everything. But if you're actually not paying much attention to the political game, it's actually pretty cool the way that is alive culturally for Aotearoa. Isn't
that's
it?
right.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Do you fear though, the way that things can go, knowing that let's burn the books?
Historical lessons.
Again, by understanding history the way that you are interested now, do you have a positive look on it? Do you stay attentive?
Yeah, I have a positive look. I think we will have a good future if we're, in New Zealand, if we embrace the treaty and we are, properly bicultural. It has been interesting to look at these other parts in time where there's been domination of another culture, and they've done sorts of things like getting rid of the stories and getting rid of the art forms and the cultural expressions, and the same things have played out in colonisation. It's the same tools get used, to downplay and make the original culture feel that their art and their stories aren't as worthy as the new one that's come in. So I'm talking about here in the Freedom of Birds when Venice had been ruled by Napoleon, and actually then he brings in their enemies to rule over them. But he bans things like Carnevale, which is the thing with the masks and, you know, and that whole art form that was 300 or 400 years old of commedia dell'arte with these stock characters and, you know, that's that Harlequin outfit and, you know, all that kind of stuff, and just banned, and that's it. And it took until the 1970s, I think it was, before that Carnevale stuff came back in Venice. So things can change massively for a long time when these new powers come in and change that. And we've all seen that in various ways with colonisation today as well, and playing out in our own lives and, you know, what's happened for people. But it is wonderful to see Maori culture coming back and the stories and the language and everything that that we have now, so much more integrated. Yeah.
There's faith.
Yeah.
We're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
I think we'll just keep on using the words as we learn them as we can, and the names, and, you know, we'll just keep, hopefully, you know, just building on that.
Yeah, you can make a lot of difference in 1 or 2 generations.
Yeah.
For good and for bad. But yeah.
Nice. Chloe, would you like to bring something up before we wrap it up? You got a few questions. Oh, I love it. I love the questions. I love your takes.
I was going to ask you, well, I could ask you afterwards, but whether do you go on TikTok and look at other authors? Because Book Talk is like my favourite thing.
I know. I should be on that. I need help.
Here we go.
You guys tell me how to do this stuff.
Book talkers.
Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, do you not know?
I've come across, but can you please? Book Talk?
Book Talk is TikTok for books, and it's a way for authors to promote themselves. People are readers as well, to promote books and give reviews on books, and that's how I discover.
Do
most
they
of
do
mine.
any snippets? What is the catch on that?
So it depends on who you're getting it from. If it's from an author, then they'll be promoting their own books, or like behind the scenes sort of things. They do all sorts of things, like read a little like snippet of the book, like the really catchy stuff, usually the saucy stuff, the stuff that gets lots of views, and then there's people who are book talkers, and they basically just consume as many books as possible and give reviews.
Okay.
And a lot of them, they'll like choose a genre as well. So they'll be like, oh, I'm into like true crime, or I'm into this, or, you know, whatever, historical fiction. And they give reviews, and it's so interesting, because I have always wondered what because a lot of them are on like Kindle Unlimited or like Amazon, like I assume self-published authors. I know that you can get books through like a publisher, but I'm assuming a lot of them are self-published. And then am I right in saying that they get paid per words read? Do you know, through like Amazon or through Kindle? I could be incorrect.
I think
on that.
there might be something where
like
if someone has returned it before a certain number of pages are read, they get
something
it
like
for
that.
free, or, you know, like the author doesn't get the full amount or something.
Yeah,
Do
something
you think
like
it's
that.
Something like that.
Yeah, so I read it was something about like how many pages had been read is tied up with the author's fee. So
wow, that's crazy.
do you have Kindle? Or
no,
Kindle? Oh, okay.
I'm buzzing. Okay.
Yeah, so you get your Kindle, you sign up to your Amazon account, and you get a thing called Kindle Unlimited. It's not required, because you can still purchase books under there, but I think it's like $17 or $18 a month. And then if you can then download books under Kindle Unlimited, which I'm assuming the fees are much less. I don't actually know how the fee structure works. And then you can borrow you borrow those books, and you can borrow them for as long as you want, but you can only hold 20 in your Kindle at any one time. So then, if you don't read it, you return it or whatever to swap it out for another one. And you can just keep like downloading, reading.
Right.
And you can also purchase books. So if there's books, like I purchased one of yours, like then, but it's for a lower rate, I guess, because the publisher doesn't have the manufacturing costs. And then those ones you own on your Kindle. But it's so interesting because a lot of the authors I follow on social media, and I'm like, oh, I wonder how does it work?
Yeah.
And
book talk, Stephanie.
Yeah, gotta get on it.
I go off grid. I hide.
Yeah.
Gonna come here. You're gonna tell me to go to TikTok.
Exactly. This is so it's so interesting.
Do they all sing and dance as well?
No. Do you know what is so interesting? I'm fascinated with how people can be on social media and have strong social media presence without physically being on social media.
Okay, so they're not all videoing themselves.
And a lot of them are they might choose an image. So it might be an image of, I don't know, early 1800s France or something that you've got, and then you might put your book cover, and then you might use the auto voice, so you type out a blur or a part of your story that you that is really captivating, and then you apply a voice to it on TikTok, and that's basically just reading it out for you, and that is the TikTok. And so it's just capturing people with little snippets of the story, and you're oh yeah, cool, I'll save that one. And, and I'm always doing it. I add it to my save list, and then when I'm stuck for a book, I go back through and I'm download. Yeah.
Okay.
It's such an interesting way to do social media, because so much of it is people in front of the camera, and it's sometimes you actually don't need to do any of that.
There you go.
Yeah.
We'll give you our cards at the end of the show. But are you on any of them? I know you're on Instagram. Do you enjoy the thing of being there and chatting and being with people?
Yeah, I like the connections that you make.
Yeah, the community aspect.
The community aspect, yeah. I'm not very good always at thinking up things to put on it, though. Yeah. Because you just think, it's not very interesting, someone sitting at a laptop for 6 hours a day,
this is the place you need to put your did you know croissants?
True. Yeah.
Make a note.
Yeah,
research
right.
Beside herself.
The name, the shoes that prostitutes wore,
exactly. All of that stuff.
In Italy.
Yeah.
There you go. Maximizing the work, maximizing the ways that you can.
Then I might remember where I got it from as well if I put it in.
Go back on my TikTok.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So easiest way for us to buy the books, to contact you, to get to know more about what you're doing, Stephanie, please.
Probably searching ebooks. They're all available as ebooks or audiobooks, or just ask your local best friend bookstore, and I'm sure they can get them in for you.
There you go. Do you have your books here in Whitianga in the Coromandel?
Yeah,
nice.
Carson's in Thames is always
great.
Love that bookstore.
Great. Yeah, and so
there you go. For the beautiful people in the Coromandel and around the world, because we go everywhere with our show as well. Thank you so much. How cool.
Thank you. So fun to be on.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, real pleasure. Thanks so much. Wow. We really appreciate having you here. For us, it's all about diversity, bringing different people with different stories, different cultural backgrounds, and understanding and seeing what you're doing. It's oh, cool. The world is full of cool people doing interesting work. So thanks for reaffirming that for us.
Thank you.
Chloe, always a pleasure.
Thank you for letting me ask all the technical questions.
Thank you. Always important.
Thank you.
Blue Ginger, beautiful Kai. How was dinner?
So
delicious. Yeah, really good.
There you go. For the beautiful people coming to visit the coromandelblueginger.co.nz, we had them on the screen. Beautiful Kai. They were busy. Tuesday is the locals day, and they made some beautiful kai for us. We put it on that story on Instagram and on Facebook, so make sure to check them out. If you're coming, all the motels are busy. We've been collaborating with a lot of the accommodations and businesses in town, and it's been a good summer. People are doing good, the best they can, obviously, with after crazy 3 summers of no summer. So coming to the Coromandel, make sure to support local businesses and read local authors.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, team. Thank you. We'll be back on Thursday. Peace. Ciao.